My name's Anthony. I'm a 7th year doctoral student in clinical psych, an addict and an alcoholic, another bozo on the bus, and I care about you.
Yes, and I'm LouiLou. My pronouns are he and him. I am in recovery for crystal meth and alcohol. I'm a former Miss Castro Country Club, and I am always in search of balance. Yes, and each week we will provide and create a brave space where we can engage in conversation around topics of recovery.
Our intention is to hold and inspire better spaces for more people in recovery by tackling issues sometimes used to separate us.
But before we do that, please remember to like, share, and ding that bell.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yes,
and now the disclaimer. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on at the CCC are ours alone. We do not represent anyone but ourselves. The material and information shared here is for general information purposes only. In other words, we are just friends behind a mic here to entertain you. We did it.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, if you're listening, we are trying to get Bonnie Violet on. We were having some technical difficulties a little bit earlier.
Absolutely.
So at some point, she might be joining us. So just giving you the heads up.
And it has nothing to do with our amazing producer now. Brandon's been working with the lovely Steven to get us.
That's right. So our team, we've talked about this before. Our team has been growing, and Steven is part of the production team now. And this is the first time that he is behind the wheel, and might be the reason why we look clear. Because if you've been watching some of our previous episodes, we have been pixelated AF.
Actually, it was Brandon. Brandon came up with it. We were on the wrong browser.
So Brandon, I sit corrected. Okay. So Louis, how are you?
Well, you know what? This has been a tough week, a tough few days, and I am processing it. I'm working through it. I think that the gift of recovery is that it has given me courage to remain open-minded, willing to kind of face that more that will always be revealed. So that's it. How about you? How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I submitted chapters 3 and 4 yesterday. So about 70% of my dissertation is done. So I just am waiting back to hear about edits. And then once I hear back about edits, I will then start collecting data and then collect data. Blah, 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 blah. The point is that I feel very good. Yesterday, after I submitted the chapters, I was like lying in my bed and my body was buzzing and I was like looking at the ceiling.
And it wasn't your grinder, was it?
I don't have a grinder.
No, okay. So no, when you were saying these are all the things that you have to do so that you can be ready for your orals or do your orals. I'm thinking, could you imagine if we had to do all that work in order to do oral?
Oh,
come on. There would be no hoo-has sucked.
Yeah.
Or licked.
That's so funny. That's hilarious. Well, speaking, you brought up, is it working?
How's it sound?
I don't know. Is it working?
Yes, it is. Can you hear us?
All right.
Does it sound better?
There's an echo.
Still.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's going on.
Oh, I'm sorry, Bonnie Violet. Well, hopefully we can push through that. So we're airing now. We were just going through our how are you? So you're showing up at a perfect time.
Exactly. Like Bonnie Violet just popped up and I'm like, oh my God.
So was it my turn to say hi?
Yes.
I'd be good. A little frazzled with technology, but overall happy to be on here with y'all.
It's good to see you.
Absolutely.
It's good to see
We
you.
might want to ask people that are listening if they're hearing that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing a little bit of like as you're coming in, you're breaking up a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, for folks listening, if there's an echo on your end, let us know. We are fine tuning our systems.
Watch when Brandon gets here, it's gonna he's gonna press this one button and
Jaylon says there is an echo.
Okay, why don't I just pop off and you guys do it without me?
Well, why don't you pop off and come back on and see if we can work it out?
How?
I don't know. I'm hopeful. Okay.
It's all good.
Okay.
Well.
All right. Well, we had that was a cameo by our very own Bonnie Violet. Sorry about the technical issues.
Jaylon, is there still an echo?
I love that we are doing this live.
Exactly.
We are troubleshooting live. You know what? We are a humble podcast. We do not aim to be professional.
Oh, see, it's gone.
Now the echo is
unfortunately, gone. I believe it was on Bonnie Violetton, and I think that we were talking before. We were thinking about like the topic that's gonna come up. It's a great segue, but we may end up having to continue this conversation, and we can always invite Bonnie Violet back to be a part of that.
And on that note, so thank you all for bearing with us. Jaylon, thank you for letting us know what was going on outside. So today's topic is although maybe not the best introduction for this topic, but today's topic is transgenerational trauma, right?
Well, it's like R&B music. It's like it has this very nice like melody to it, but the topics are pretty heavy.
Yeah, it's the same thing with salsa music. Salsa music is very like cheerful, and then like the lyrics are like, "You broke my heart, I'm gonna burn your house down." It's kind of incongruent.
So we didn't get the banner for what the topic is today.
Oh, that's okay. So today's
I'm gonna hold his feet to the fire.
Yeah. So today's topic is transgenerational trauma. So transgenerational trauma is basically, put simply, is trauma that's carried over from generation to generation. And this can happen in a bunch of different ways. 3 identified ways. There could be like a direct transmission of transgenerational trauma. And so a direct transmission of trauma would be like, you have a parent and you see your parent dealing with a difficult situation, right? And so you're exposed to certain trauma. Right. Sometimes there's like domestic violence going on, or there's just violence in general. Maybe there's, for example, some parents, when they get angry with their children, they beat their children, right? And so that's something that's carried over through generations. So that's a direct transfer. Then you have environmental factors of trauma. So this could be like having a group of people that have survived a shared trauma. So one of the more common ones that we hear referred to is like the HIV/AIDS epidemic, right? So that was a shared trauma. You have 9/11. So with the country, that is a shared trauma.
COVID.
You have COVID. We had the Holocaust, for example. Apartheid, for example. Then there's some conversations about the transmission of trauma through biological mechanisms. So through epigenetics. And so another way of describing epigenetics is basically what are like environmental factors that in fact the development of
epigenetic. That's a fun word.
Yeah, it's the way the environment impacts your development when you are an ovum, a little one. So the point is that transgenerational trauma refers to trauma that is carried down through generations, right? And another way that we can think about this is like, what your grandparents did, right? If your grandparents, like they were dealing with a bunch of like really rough environmental factors, right? They learned how to adapt to that environment, and then that got carried down into the next generation, and on and on and on and on. And so what a lot of people find themselves confronted with is like, how do I break this cycle? So sometimes what happens with transgenerational trauma is that some of it happens on the level of the subconscious. So for example, we might find ourselves in an environment and we feel very uncomfortable, our anxiety rises, and we're not quite sure what it is. Right. And this is sometimes what we refer to as triggers, right? There are these things that trigger these responses. And most of the time, these responses are very, very strong, right? And the reason why transgenerational trauma is an important topic to discuss, especially when it comes to recovery, is because when we come into recovery, not only are we dealing with physical manifestations of addiction, we are also sometimes holding with us the things that happened to us in our childhood, and also the things that have happened from generations that came before us, right? So that's where I want to open up the discussion. When you think about transgenerational trauma, Louis, what are some things that come to mind for you?
I was just thinking about the issue that I'm having right now.
Tell me about
going on. For lack of a better way of kind of describing it, all throughout my youth and what have you, maybe it was something that I saw or whatever, but I have a tendency when things happen to me, not acknowledging that their potential effect on me at the time or later on. And lately, it's been coming up, and like I said, it's happened in a few areas of my life. So it's definitely something that's the cellular level. My inability to kind of acknowledge that, I need to address, and I guess it's kind of weird because there are instances where I do address things and I take care of it, but it's like, I've thought about it, and I don't want to put this on my mom or whatever, but maybe it was just how the information she got. I've always said my mom was like the rock for the family, but I never got to see how she took care of herself. She was fine, but I never got to see that. And so, always taking care of other people, always making it better for other people, always kind of ignoring that I'm worth it's worth acknowledging what I'm experiencing and working through it. And so, I mean, I feel like, yeah, I feel like that to me is a form of generational trauma.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I can relate to this. Growing up, I was raised by my grandmother, and she dealt with a lot of domestic violence, and in her family, she wasn't treated exactly the best, right? And so what I grew up seeing from her is that she took care of everyone. She took care of everyone. My mom, I can remember looking back, like there was always food on the table. I never knew that we were poor. Never knew that we didn't have money, because there was always food on the table. If I needed something, I had it. I never went without, right? But you're right. Growing up, I never saw my mom take care of herself. What I did see my mom do is I saw my mom have explosive reactions to things. I saw my mom rage when she wasn't sure how to like handle a situation, right? And I think this is certainly, like, I think it's an example of generational trauma, right? Like, I don't know how far back it goes, but I do know this. The other day, for example, so she has a friend who recently was admitted to the hospital. I'm sorry, not a friend, an uncle. And her brother went to go visit this uncle and didn't invite her. So my mom spoke to my aunt, and she says to my aunt, I'm so heartbroken that my brother would go to the hospital to see our uncle and not tell me about it and not invite me. And so she's like so heartbroken, and she's put together this story in her head about why she was left out. So finally my aunt says to her, listen, let's not tell ourselves stories, let's call.
Wow.
So my aunt was ready to fucking pop off. My aunt was telling me about this the other day. She was like, I don't understand why he would do that shit, but she knows better because she's been going to therapy and she's been doing her work. So she calls my uncle up and she goes, listen, my mom is sitting here upset that you didn't invite her to go to the hospital. What happened? And he goes, oh, like, I just happened to be in the area and I'd been neglecting coming. And so I just went. I wasn't something I gave any thought. So my aunt took that information. She gave it to my mom, and my mom was like, oh, okay. So for me, the generational trauma is in the subtle stories that we tell ourselves, right? It's like, it's the subtle ways that we try to protect ourselves.
Maybe because that's how things have unfolded in the past,
right?
Where folks, why would I believe otherwise when this is how it's happened,
right?
How it's gone down,
right? For me, it shows up as the thing that I've struggled with for a really long time is like, for me, it's this like deep involuntary feeling that I'm going to be abandoned. It's this deep involuntary feeling that I'm not good enough, that I'm not worth. Like it's something that I hear a lot of like addicts and alcoholics talk about. But for me, like when the trigger shows up, it's so intense, and then sometimes I get so angry because I'm like, where the fuck did this come from and how do I get rid of it? There's a comment from Jaylon. He writes, hypervigilance comes up for me often, feeling like I need to protect myself no matter what, or always having to be the strong one. Absolutely, Jaylon.
And
keep talking. Actually,
having people seeing you like as a strong one, they don't take into consideration that you fall apart at times, or that you feel stuff and you feel stuff intensely. I mean, honestly, and thank you, Jaylon, for the just showing your love to me the other day. That's what I was feeling. I mean, it is amazing how kind of like if the correct word is apropos this conversation is at this moment,
right?
Just because I am in it. And the thing that's most interesting is like, I realized that it is not about anybody else as much as it is about me. And that's what makes it tough, because I was telling Anthony, like, the way that I'm trying to overcome it is by having tough conversations, but trying to do that in a way that is true to who I am and also allows me to kind of get my point across, not be that old version of me that wanted to punish everybody who I felt like needed to be punished. We have a comment.
Yeah.
Oh, I love you too.
Thank you, Jaylon.
I love you too. Thank you.
You know, I also I want to respond to what you're saying, because this is something that it's well, there's two things here. The first thing is that, you know, we're talking about transgenerational trauma, and really what we're talking about is like the origin of trauma. And and although I think it's important to know the origin, and I think although it's important to know where things come from, I think in the immediate, it's more important for us to know that like we're having the experience, right? And that we begin to, excuse me, and we begin to heal there.
Yeah.
One of the, recently I was actually talking to my partner about like the somatic experiencing of traumatic memories and stuff like that. And he recommended this book. It's called Transforming the Living Legacy of Trauma. It's was written by Fisher. And there's this great...
Sounds like a fun relationship. No, I get it. No. He recommended a book.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really... He's so thoughtful.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate the book recommendation. And so one of the one of the images that they have in this book is this. It says trauma, and it has all these things that are related to trauma, and I'll read them, right? So trauma like can lead to depression and irritability, decreased concentration, numbing, loss of interest, insomnia, emotional overwhelm, loss of a sense of the future, hopelessness, shame and worthlessness, few or no memories, right? Nightmares, flashbacks, hypervigilance, mistrust, anxiety, panic attacks, chronic pain, headaches, substance abuse, eating disorders, feeling unreal or out of body, self-destructive behavior, loss of a sense of who I am, right? And so I'll call that in a second. So the takeaway is that trauma does have an origin. Trauma has a physical manifestation in our bodies. And I think one of the first things in healing from that trauma is being able to just name that the experience is happening. Let's take that comment. Slavery for people like us. Absolutely.
I was thinking about something. It's like, okay, so I think that the trauma or the experiences have become so normalized that you don't see them as an issue, like they're not a problem. Kind of like this idea, I was thinking, another thing about when you asked me what I think about generational trauma, the relationship that the male authority figure sometimes plays in the house, where you have this fear, this inert fear of they don't show emotion. There's not love. They're just like with my father. The father that I have now is loving, and we talk. But the father growing up, it was very rare that, you know, we were always excited when we had those loving moments. But it was always one of those things when the car pulled up, we could tell exactly what the car sounded like, and we would get into our positions and roles, and whatever his mood for the day was, that was the mood for the house.
That's right.
And so it's like it was on a dime.
Right. And so that's very real, right? And those stories are very important. One of the things I really like about this book is like what they advocate for is psychoeducation, right? So there was a time, for example, that the way to healing trauma was the idea was talk about where it came from, talk about how it manifests, talk about those stories, right? And what was happening for people is like they would do that. There was no container for it, and they were just re-traumatizing themselves, right? But what they have found is really helpful is psychoeducation, or that is to say, education on like what trauma looks like, where it comes from, how it manifests in the body, right? So for me, I might have an experience that creates this like really intense reaction. And what I do is I start to superimpose the same narrative differently on different situations, right? Like for me, it's like I have this profound like fear of abandonment that I'm going to be, and that, you know, that has its origins when I was a young kid. You know, one of the things that I've come to terms with, and this is something my family has acknowledged, is that when I was a young kid, my family didn't know really what to do with me. You know, like I was this gay, effeminate kid living in the projects. My family wasn't sure how to handle that. right? And so they did what they knew how to do. So there was a lot of tough love. So for example, when I would cry as a kid, they would say, let him cry. He needs to learn how to cry. Like he needs to learn, and there was a lot of
What was
boys.
that beautiful word that your mom would,
she would say cry because you don't cry blood.
But didn't she say it in Spanish?
Yeah, llora porque no llora sangre. Yeah. So she would say that, or I can remember there were like do something and he wouldn't do it, right? So I had these repeated experiences where someone was not showing up to meet an emotional need, and I was a child, right? And so I grew up with this like emotional memory, right? And this is something that I've had to work very hard to move away from. And sometimes the responses are involuntary, it's like on some level, sometimes I'm like looking at the environment on my weakest days,
Mm-hmm.
on my most vulnerable days, I'm looking at the environment and my brain feels like it's tracking for like danger, And so sometimes like I'm translating shit that doesn't need to be translated the way it is, So the takeaway is that, the scars run deep. There is a way to heal. A lot of times that healing can happen by having some education about what that looks like. Were you going to say something?
Yeah. I was thinking trauma can be like, what's really interesting. I was, when I think about this, I'm not a therapist or anything, like something as simple as like unmet promises or like unkept promises.
Sure.
Like in the moment can be completely innocent because like my uncle, he had promised to take us to Great America one time. He ended up like dying,
Oh, wow.
Being killed. But he kept promising and it didn't happen. And you know how we talk about this onion, the layers.
Sure.
Well, it's that one thing that was innocent at the time, but was so wrapped into it that it becomes like the way I think. Well, obviously, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Like nowadays, it's like I always blame it on that it's addict behavior, where it's like you say it's going to happen, I'm not going to believe it until I actually see it.
Right. So that's interesting. My family, we're dealing with something like that right now. So my uncle, he doesn't watch this in my family, right?
Hi.
But my uncle, one of my uncles has struggled with heroin addiction all my life, and I'm 38. I was talking to my aunt and she's like, honey, he's been on heroin since I was a kid, and she's in her 50s, right? So he's been on heroin all his life. And so recently he went around and he's on this kind of apology campaign, and he's been apologizing to everyone in my family. And, I heard this and I felt very hopeful. And there was a part of me that was like, yeah, dude, but like, how many times have we been here, And I hate that I had that reaction, but I'm hopeful.
Yeah.
But I'm hopeful. At the end of the conversation with my aunt, she says to me, sadly, he probably apologized while he was high.
Yeah, I know, absolutely.
And I thought, fuck, man.
You feel in a certain way in that.
Yeah, and I want to return to something that I was going to say earlier, which is like, I'm not upset with him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like addiction fucking sucks, and addiction like robs people of their lives. And like that, when I think about my uncle and I think about my uncle's struggles, that's like the context of it. And similarly, when I think about trauma, like, you were talking about like dealing with things yourself. And, I think about like trauma or like the strong reactions that I've had. And part of the healing for me has come from like allowing myself to be in relationship with people that I trust. And some of the healing has happened there. But it also takes time, like sometimes I do have a hard time figuring out like what are the things that I'm supposed to handle by myself, and what are the things that I invite people to help me with.
Something, you know what? Oh, we have a comment.
We do have a comment. Let's see.
Hello.
Thank you for this. You're so very welcome.
Thank you. So I was sharing this with my sponsor, and it came up because my sponsor shared about it, and I think it's common with gays, lesbians, anyone who is alternative, the bullying, the kind of homophobia,
right?
And I had not been thinking about it. And this is one of the things that kind of led me to this understanding that I had been minimizing things. But all of a sudden I was thinking about the occasions where I was bullied. And there was this one specific occasion. I believe that I want to say I was in second grade. At the time, I did not know that I was gay, but there was a girl that I had a crush on, and she was with her cousin, who ironically now is gay. And they followed me around the school and taunted me.
Yeah.
Well, she was just with him, but they taunted me, and he yelled obscenities and names at me, and I just wanted to get away, and I couldn't get away, and there seemed to be no kind of relief. And also, it seemed like no one else was paying attention to what this was going on, as if it were just like games that kids play. And I didn't think about this until for some time. I guess like it said, few or no memories, or not thinking about it because of the trauma or the way it felt. Because thinking about it, it's like I would die if I saw that happening to someone that was my age. That is unacceptable behavior.
That's right.
I don't care if it's a child, and kids are cruel, but I mean, come on now. Like, what would I say to this kid if I saw him today? You know, it's like, do you know that the type of unnecessary hardships that you put on the people?
Right.
You think it's like, yeah.
Yeah, no, I 100% get that. I've had those thoughts before too, and I think my sense is that a lot of LGBT plus people like walk around with like the numbing and with few or no memories,
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that Fisher writes about is that what happens is that we may not have the recollection of the actual memories, but we have the physical manifestation of those memories, right? So they show up as like feelings and sensations, and
as feelings, sensations, as mask, as armor,
right?
Because it's like I spent a lot of my time trying not to look a certain way or walk a certain way or do a certain thing, because someone would notice a subtle anything, and then it would become an opportunity for them to kind of belittle me.
Yeah. I mean, there was 100%. I like so much of my childhood was characterized by my working very hard to not do the things that would make people call me a faggot, right? Because that was the thing that I heard. And I remember like when I moved to the West Coast and like gay people would use the word faggot, I had such a hard time hearing it because I had only ever heard it as something to like taunt me and hurt me, right? Like
Absolutely.
All throughout elementary school, like all throughout middle school. It happened in high school a couple times. But and all the while, like, the one thing I want to say here too is like, and all the while, I feel, and we know this about trauma, right? We know that when people have like trauma related responses, is that those responses are protective, right? So when we lash out or when we isolate, right? Like these are all ways that we've tried to protect ourselves. And what ends up happening is that at some point we realize this isn't working anymore. Yeah. And that's something that we find with like drugs and alcohol, right? Like, for example, like people who have backgrounds with trauma, they might turn to drugs and alcohol, right? Like you walk around with so much anxiety and so much fear in your life, and you have your first drink and you have a sense of relief. What? You mean it? What? Are you kidding me? Like that is like, that's a perfect formula for addiction.
And it sucks when you no longer have that easy, quick fix. You're like, I might start smoking.
Right. And that's what we see with a lot of people who come in to the rooms for the first time, is like they stop drinking and they stop using, and holy shit, all the fucking feelings start to rush back. And there isn't a name for the feelings, there isn't a context for a context for the feelings, right? All they know is like, I feel horrible. I'm having these reactions in certain environments. Like I don't want to be around these people. I feel scared. I feel anxious. I don't want to raise my hand. I don't want to, and there's all this,
Exactly.
And it's because that was the thing for a lot of people, that the drugs and the alcohol was putting to rest, or getting that to rest.
And those are the times when I hear Bonnie Violet in my ear, and that's when I like encourage people to have grace for themselves. Like, feel what you're feeling. It's like there is no right or wrong way to experience this,
Right. Right. And so let's talk. Maybe we can talk a little bit about like our own healing or experiences with trauma, because and it's also feeling like we might have to have a second conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
A second conversation around this. So one of the things that I'm thinking about here is conversations I've had with people, a couple of newcomers recently who were saying to me, I'm getting sober, but like I'm noticing that now I'm having a lot of sex, or I'm watching a lot of porn, or I'm eating a lot, right? And the idea is, and for a lot of these folks, they're like, and if I'm not doing these things, I have these feelings. So basically they realize I'm so uncomfortable. There's something happening. I'm so uncomfortable. I don't know what to do. Right. Excuse me. And so in that situation, when I think things get like a little kind of like nuance, one of my first suggestions to people is to try to go into therapy. And if they can't afford therapy, to start tapping into like networks of people that are healthy or who might be relating to the same thing. So one of the things I hear about in the rooms a lot is like we tell people find your tribe.
Yeah, find your tribe.
Right. And one of the best ways to find your tribe is to figure out like when you're around people who helps you feel safe.
Yes, exactly.
You know, like when you're around someone, like do you feel like you can breathe a little easier? You know, and there are those people.
You're my tribe.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you know, like whatever that takes, you know. And sometimes it takes getting used to certain environments and figuring out like, hey, you know, that person, when they said hi to me, I felt very like calm, you know, or I felt very safe around this person.
Later on, it's like usually, like I agree with you on that. One of the things that I like to suggest to folks is, especially if you're going through something and you feel like you need to talk about, you know how folks talk about things at meetings or whatever. That for me is always a great way to sort through bullshit, because there are folks who are not going to be able to handle, receive, or whatever, and maybe want to stop you from having whatever conversation. And mind you, there might be some generational trauma and feeling manipulated by somebody telling about their, because we have a tendency to do that sometimes. We come into recovery and it's maybe, if it's all that we've known, it's all that we do. But talk about it with people, and you know, because generally I can tell if somebody's genuine and needs someone to listen to when they maybe form it by sorry, I don't want to unload or what. Well, you know what? I'm sitting here. I want to hear it.
Yes.
And also, when I go to meetings, like I say, it's like, I'm going to shit all over this room until I am able to process what I need to process. Because it's like, in any situation, I don't know what it is that's going to help a person out. You know, it may just be my ability to have courage to talk about what I need to talk about, and nothing else, you know?
Yeah, I hear this so much. One of the things that I think about a lot is, excuse me, when I'm in different spaces, like I just assume that people are carrying some type of pain, some type of hurt, right? Even in those situations, like not too long ago, I was like sitting in a room and the person was sharing and they were talking about like their yacht and their 3 condos. And I was like, okay, bitch, none of this shit is relatable to me. But underneath all of that, there was a pain.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was like a pain. And I thought, I was reminded in that instance, you know, all the kind of physical, like all the things on the surface they're really kind of immaterial, you know, because it's underneath the surface is where the fundamental similarities are. And so for me, when I'm in a situation with someone who feels really difficult, I try to tap back into that part of myself that's like, I know pain, and I know pain that makes me say and do things that maybe I don't necessarily mean, you know, and I try to keep that open for myself. We have a comment. Go ahead. Jaylon writes,
I think the hardest thing to unpack when it comes to trauma is the notion that our parents did the best they could with what they had. The revelation I had about that came in my 4th step around my dad's neglect and absenteeism. Realizing that I'm a human just like he is, whom also has a story, I'm doing the best I can with what I have, which allows me to hold space for my truth and have grace. Absolutely.
That's a hard one.
Especially when
that's a hard
when
one.
you're listening to someone you just started doing the work with or whatever, and they're telling you blah blah blah, this that they that, and they're not in that place yet to acknowledge that they have a part in it, and that, you know, it's and I have to catch myself sometimes, because I want to say, you know, what I frame it as, you know, what I'm hoping for you is one day you'll be able to see this how it really is, as opposed to how it is right now. But even that is kind of like, oh, so you're telling me I'm wrong?
Right.
Yeah, it's not easy, but
right.
I appreciate
that, Jaylon. You know, it reminds me of an experience I had with my mom recently. I think I may have shared this with you about. So one of the things my mom said to me, she said this to me twice. Once a couple years ago, she says to me, you know, Anthony, I can't believe I'm saying this on air. So my mom says to me, you know, Anthony, I really don't think you should bother like dating or going out with people. It never seems to work out for you. I think you should just focus on your career. And I remember looking at my mom and feeling devastated. And I thought to myself, this is the most abusive, like, this is the most toxic shit.
Yeah, I was thinking it's good that you weren't violent.
Yeah. No, I wasn't violent anymore. I think we should add 5 more minutes just because of the late start, Stephen, if that's okay. So I remember thinking, well, when I heard it, like, my mom's in her 80s, okay? And my mom loves me. I know she does.
Mm-hmm.
And I know when she said that, she wasn't trying to hurt me. That was motivated. Like, that was probably more about her own stuff. And I don't mean to spill her tea, although I just did, but whatever. What family doesn't have their shit?
It's your tea.
Yeah. But it's my tea, right? And you know, what family doesn't have their stuff? And so, but there's a beautiful ending to this story. So years later, she said that shit again.
Mm-hmm.
And that second time, for whatever reason, something about it penetrated, and as I didn't like it. So a couple months ago, I was sitting on my sofa at home, and I was, I'm in a relationship, and I started to think about what my mom was saying. And I remember sitting there and I was crying because I was like, I felt defective, because I was like dealing with feelings. And so I remember I called my mom up and I said, listen, I need to talk to you. What you said, you've said this thing to me twice now, and it's hurt me, and I need to address it. And she doubled down. Mm-hmm. And she says, well, I'm only telling you this for your own safety. And she says to me, she doubled down again, and she goes, what I'm telling you is that you need to look for the patterns that show you that things are not safe. You need to look for the patterns that show you that people are not good for you. Mm-hmm. And I said, Mom, no. As long as I'm looking for evidence that things are not working out, that is what I'm going to find.
Absolutely.
Like, I know my mom wasn't advocating for me to be ignorant, you know what I mean? But like, what I think she was coming from a very fearful place, and I know my mom's history. And so I got it. So the beautiful thing that came from this conversation is that days later, we were just having a casual conversation. And for the first time ever, she asked me about my partner.
Nice.
She says, how's he doing?
Ooh,
I've been meaning to talk about.
And that's in the work that you're doing to break this pattern, because you are doing that work. You've been doing that work and connecting her and this. I mean, it's really kind of like healing all of you.
Right. And what I want to say about this is that she didn't apologize. Because maybe she has never been taught to apologize, or maybe she doesn't know how to access that within herself. But in her way, I like to believe that she apologized.
Absolutely.
Right. And I think part of my own healing is in being open into the things that people are capable of doing.
She's going to apologize now if she's listening.
Well, she only speaks Spanish, and she's in her 80s. She's not fucking with an iPad. My family, we just got her an iPhone, and whenever we FaceTime, it's all forehead. So she doesn't. But the point is that Jalen, I guess what I want to say here is that I don't know specifically about your situation, but what's happened for me is that one of the things that I love about my recovery is that God always surprises me, and people surprise me. And I just have to be open to that, which I'm not implying that you're not, but I just wanted to share.
Another thing that I've talked to my sponsees about, and I feel like this applies. I think that with the work that we're doing, I get to decide how much value I want to place on the relationship. And I mean, with family members or whatever. And if I place that value, then I get to decide without any judgment from anyone else around if I'm going to work on it. And if I decide in that moment not to work on it, no judgment either. It's like, ideally, the work will get us all right. But there's some relationships and some folks that are just not willing to budge, to change, to grow with you. And I mean, I still have to, I don't want to say I still have to, for myself and for my sanity, do that work.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. The other day I heard this share, and there was, it's actually a mutual friend of ours. And our friend was saying, I'm tired of being told I'm resilient. I'm tired of being told that I'm strong. I don't want to be resilient. I don't want to have to be strong. Right. Mm-hmm. And I hear that, and one of the things that I don't want to forget, and one of the things, like, if you're listening to this and some of this is resonating for you, I think one of the things that I want to get across is that for people who've experienced trauma, if you are alive, it's because you're strong. Mm-hmm. It's because you found ways to adapt. And and maybe like this is an invitation to begin like your healing process. And part of that is like in slowing down and being gentle with yourself, you know, like if you're having a strong reaction to like a person, place, or thing or situation, you know, like you're having a strong reaction, it's okay. You know, something that was told to me in my very first meeting when I went to AA, a person looked me right in the eyes and they said, Anthony, you never have to drink or use again. You know, and although I can't say that to people who are suffering from like traumatic experiences, I can say that there is like peace, there is relief, those things are accessible. And sometimes the work to get to that is difficult, but I can promise you it's worth it. So, God, this is heavy.
Yeah, exactly.
This is really, really heavy. This is really heavy. This is reminding me of where is it and how it works. There is one who has that answer. That one is God. May you find him now. That's how I'm feeling right now.
Exactly.
But there is so one of the so you know, circling it back to recovery and being mindful of time. We're gonna go a little over today since we had a late start. But I guess that's one of the things that I want to lead with here is that there you can heal from trauma. You can heal, and we don't even have to call it trauma, right? We can say we can heal from anxiety. We can heal from suffering. Those things are possible.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, at least for me, that healing begins with slowing down. You know, slowing down and being gentle with myself and connecting with the right people.
And identifying that it's a problem, because I feel like the thing that I was talking about the minimizing, it just worked for me. It just was a part of my character, and that's bullshit.
Right.
Like it doesn't have to be a part of me.
Right. Right. And you know, one of the, this also reminds me of, when we're talking about like interpersonal relationships. And one of the things that I had to learn is like, for example, you'll say, some people will say, well, I know this happens in families sometimes where like people will show tough love. And my opinion about that is like, I don't know. This is for me. I don't know that I necessarily need quote unquote tough love from the people closest to me. Like for me, what's been the most beneficial has been love and support and encouragement. The world is tough enough. I don't need my inner circles just to like challenge me twice as hard as like the outside,
especially
world.
If they're not showing love to begin with, because I
Right.
think that what we're starting to understand, and I think we've talked about this before, this idea of love being nurturing and caring and supportive, and not I love you because I'm going to work and making sure you have a place to sleep and making sure that you have food. I'm not talking to you.
Right. That's bell. Yeah. I think we were talking about bell hooks. I think it was bell hooks. God, it was bell hooks. But she was saying that for many of us, when we think back of our childhoods, we weren't loved, we were cared for.
Exactly.
Because love is the spiritual uplifting of a person. And many of us didn't experience that.
Exactly.
I had a conversation with a friend the other day, and I think this is a nice segue to the end of this episode. Hey. So I was talking to a friend the other day, and he was talking about how he feels he's lost time. He's like, this is I think he's older. I don't know how old he is, but in his opinion, he's older. And he says to me, Anthony, this is the first time in my life I'm like discovering who I am. And I feel like I've lost all of this time. And like, why does it even matter? Like, this is so stupid. Like and all I kept thinking while I was listening to him was like, how exciting that you are at a point in your life right now where you are rediscovering things about yourself. And I think maybe that's like the other thing that I want to get across here is that like no time is lost.
Yeah.
Like nothing is lost. Like literally, we talk about all we have is today, right? Like healing can start right now.
Yeah.
Happiness and like joy, these are things that we have to work for, which is something that I had to come to terms with. Like I thought that, like just one day, like I'm going to happen upon happiness. You know what I mean? And it's just not that. Like happiness and peace of mind are things that I've had to cultivate. Right. And for me in my recovery, it means I'm going to meetings, it means I'm doing step work. It means I'm sharing. It means I'm doing service commitments, right? Like these are the things that I have to do in order for me to be okay.
Yeah. Kudos to your friend for having the conversation. Cause I think that when I've been going through whatever I've been going through, the messiness that we talk about, the difficulty, sometimes it's in talking about it.
Yeah.
That we kind of take the whatever it is, that it's the grip that it has on us, where we get a handle on it. Ugh.
Yeah. Yes.
We're carrying like I'm gonna need a massage after this.
Yeah. So takeaways, like like wrapping up this episode, is, there is a solution. and if
almost none of us like the
self self-loathing. Yeah. So first off, this is a recovery podcast, and for many of us, drinking and using and all the other things, like, these were the answers to our pain. And what I've learned in my own experience is that those things stop becoming viable solutions.
Yeah.
They stop working. And
they usually stop working before you're done with them.
Right. Right. And so the first step in my own healing was in not drinking and using, and having to replace that with something else. And the things that I replaced that with was recovery. Yeah. Right. Like, that's when I started my journey over 10 years ago.
And actually, whatever it is that you're using as that quick healing, or quick fix to not feel, whether it's shopping, whether it's food, whether it's sex, whether it's, just anything, because we are resilient.
Yeah. I mean,
we're pretty amazing how we can find ways to our bodies, these mechanisms that we have.
Yeah, they're quite resourceful. Yeah. Our brains, our bodies are designed to survive. That's why, like, if you put your head underwater, you're going to shoot back up. Similarly, like, emotionally, our brains are designed to survive. And sometimes the ways that it's adapted to the world, sometimes that hurts. And we have to use that as information, and it's information that we can use not to beat ourselves with, but to use to, like, guide us into the right direction.
Absolutely.
And so if you're feeling depressed, that's a sign that perhaps there's a lot going on and you're slowing down, and maybe what you're needing is connection. In that case. So I think there will be a sequel to this episode, and hopefully we can get Bonnie Violet on. We'll figure out the technical stuff.
Yeah.
And then I guess, but before we start transitioning out, I would just thank folks who
we can't use that word, remember?
I know, but I have, and I can't go back.
No, okay.
But I want to just thank folks who are listening in on the first half of this. We are probably going to edit that shit out, because y'all don't need to hear us, like, sorting through getting on.
It's like that's
it's part of our charm.
That's gonna be that's gonna be one of our commercials.
It's part of our charm. It was like, can you hear us now?
I know.
Oh, poor Bonnie Violet. All right, so let's start closing out.
Yeah, exactly. The Castro Country Club is a safe and sober community center for all people, and a refuge for the LGBTQ recovery community.
We provide programs and services that help people change their lives by supporting personal growth.
Our vision is to reduce the suffering of addiction by connecting people to community, opportunity, and support.
You can find more information, including all the ways to contact us, at www.castrocountryclub.org/podcasts.
And tune in every Tuesday at 4 p.m.-ish Pacific Standard Time. We go live on our Castro Country Club Facebook and YouTube channels.
Find us wherever you listen to podcasts.
Anthony LouiLou.